Thomas Paseggi, our president, will help you with that if you can send him a direct chat in the chat box. Say hello, Thomas. I might actually just hand it over to Thomas now because I think he's going to do an acknowledgement and welcome from the QFCA.
Thanks, Chris. Hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, I'm coming from Caloundra on the Sunshine Coast, so Gabi country. So Nara, as they say here, hello. And as a migrant to this country and in the spirit of reconciliation, I wanted to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands of wherever we're coming in from today. And acknowledge this work as important work that's probably happened for thousands of years of bringing communities together and helping people connect with each other. That's all I wanted to say. However, I'll be really keen if there's actually someone in the session today who is Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander who would like to actually say something on behalf of their people or their mob or everyone, that it's descendants from the original custodians of the land, please, I would like you to kind of say something right now. Otherwise, I'll hand back over to Chris.
Excellent. Well, I think we may as well get underway with our community development webinar, and I'll hand things over to Anne. Thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you, Chris. Don't know if everyone can see me and hear me. I hope so. I can't see myself. Okay. It's lovely to see you all here. So my name's Anne Ingamells, and my main role in this series of workshops is around the research. I work at Griffith Uni, and I'll be working with Helen from Griffith University, who's not here today, and Natasha from QFCA, who is here today. We'll be trying to gather up the story of the research and feed that back to you, so together we can co-create a report that reflects where people think things are at now and where people want to see things go. So but right now I want to just set the scene for today. This is a long-awaited conversation following on from the CD conference, but don't worry if you weren't at the CD conference, it's for everyone today. Everyone is welcome. So there'll be 5 webinars, and the intent is that they are conversational. However, we feel it's important today that we set the scene, so we all agree on this is what we're going to talk about, because people use the term community development to mean so very many things, and we want to carve out the territory for discussion. So today we're going to actually do a bit more than our share of the talking, and we ask you to bear with that because it is scene setting. Also, by the way, we have rethought this process of how we move forward, and so long as it works okay with a lot of people being involved in the session, we'll continue to work in this way through the whole 5 sessions. So you will be able to register again for the next 4 sessions, and we'll work with whoever wants to move forward. So today we're going to develop this clear picture of community development, and if we succeed, by the end of today's session you'll know what community development is in our terms. You'll see how it's different from other work we do in community. You'll have a sense of whether you as a practitioner and your centre actually do this work or are set up for this work. And you'll know whether you want to participate in further discussions about this thing called community development. So the way we see it resonates with most of the literature on community development and with the way Neighbourhood Houses Tasmania and Neighbourhood Houses Victoria have framed their community development framework. The real question is, does it resonate with practice? And that's the thing we're not sure about. Today's session might challenge some of your assumptions. It might leave you with lots of questions. But try to hang in with the exploration because it will take us somewhere, and I think you'll find it useful. I'll talk more about the research towards the end of today's session, but for now, as Chris said, it's important that you know that this is being recorded. We want other people to be able to see it. So please participate, be brave, say what you want to say, but don't say anything that you don't want little ears out there to hear. You can save that for the breakout rooms, which won't be recorded. So please relax, and we'll begin. I'll hand over to B, who's going to start the conversation. Thanks, B.
Okay, well, we're going to go into breakout groups is our first introduction, so that we can introduce each other. I think we're in groups of 4. So Chris, I think, and Natasha are going to put us into these breakout groups, and you've got about only 5 minutes. And the intention is for you to meet each other and maybe share what it is that brought you here today. What is the main question that you bring? And so why you came to this, joined in this webinar. So could we do that now for 5 minutes?
And when you return to the main room, we'll get you to write your question on the chat area, so that at the end of today, we have all the things that brought people here. I noticed some people had a go at this when they registered, but a lot of people didn't. And it may be that it's not a question. It may be that it's to hear what others think about community development or some other thing. So just share what brought you here in the discussion and then on the chat area.
Okay, I think we have everyone back now. B.
Okay, right. Well, hi everyone. My name is B. I'm part of the host group that have put this webinar together. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces and to meet others, even if it's only virtually. It's a new way for connecting for most of us. It's hard to believe, isn't it? We're mastering it. I can't believe it. We are. Well, I've been involved with neighbourhood centres for many years in many ways. Many years ago, I worked both in a service delivery role and a community development role at different times. Currently, I'm an elected member of the management committee for the Caloundra Community Centre. I sat on the QFCA board for 2 years, and I now chair the QFCA CD subcommittee. So neighbourhood centres and community development have been quite important for me most of my public life. Now, they've been around, neighbourhood centres, for a long time, since the 60s. Historically, they were established as a place by local people to work together on matters of importance to them. They were and are to this day relevant to the local area in which they are located. To this end, they are an important part of the locality-based social infrastructure in Queensland. Indeed, across Australia and in many countries around the world. They have traditionally operated within a citizen-led community development framework. Ordinary people taking responsibility for their well-being, learning and doing it together. In our neighbourhood centres, we pay attention to be welcoming, and our doors are open to anyone who presents themselves. We respond quickly to community emergencies such as floods, fires, and now COVID. A lot of human resources are allocated in advocating for people to access services required at different points in their lives, often the last port of call for many. In regional areas, they have an even greater significance as community members have even less access to specialised services. Well, each centre is unique, as you can see from this slide. Everyone looks different. They do share a lot of common aspirations.
Do I just click on her?
In the mission statements and objectives, I see words like empower local people, give people a voice around matters of concern, build local leadership, connect people, create vibrant and sustainable communities, and so on. Our focus is on people-centered development. People-centered development through community-based accessible services, a range of community activities such as support groups, as well as community development. In the recent publication, Participatory Development Practice, by Anthony Kelly and Peter Westerby, they say, in practice, people-centered development takes place in two different program forms: service delivery and community development. Although they are different, they are not oppositional, but form part of the whole, each requiring attention. Both service delivery and CD programs are extremely important. But we do know in practice, lots of different words and titles are used to name the work we do. As the intent today is to start a conversation with you around community development, we would like to invite you back into your breakout groups to brainstorm all the things you do at your center that you or your center call community development. So it's over to you, Natasha, to get us going on that one. Here.
So this is a brainstorming exercise to look at discussing just the things that you and your centre do that you would refer to as community development. And so not to go into descriptions of it, just name it as a brainstorming exercise. And we'd ask before you start if one person could be nominated to write these things down into a Word document separate on your computer. So then they can simply just be copied and pasted into the chat when we return back as a whole group. And also leading on down the, actually, yes, that's all for now, and I'll come back to a technical part further on. So I'll leave it to Chris to put us into great breakout groups.
Made their way back now. Over to Anne.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I scribed, so I just need to upload my scribing. All right. Well, I think everyone else is uploading stuff too. Is that how it is? Oops, not, oh, I think is that me? Not sure. Okay, so lots of things have been uploaded, and we will go through all of, the research team will go through all of this and record it all for you to see how everyone is thinking about community development. We'll get that to you by the next webinar. But just for now, I just want to take a couple of minutes and refer to some of those things. Most of the work with groups that arises in communities where there's a need and a staff member runs a group, that's really important local work because neighbourhood centres are unique in being able to respond to groups. Most of that we would put in a community building frame. That's not specifically what we're going to call today community development. Critical to neighbourhood centres and to communities, and a useful part of a community development framework. But the method of community development goes a bit further than that. So community building is one approach. Another common activity is running that cycle of events and activities that community centres do. For the most part, these two are part of community building and part of service delivery because often they're organised for communities to participate in. It's a critical activity again, but not actually often CD. Local project work. Several centres are saying they do local project work and they develop local projects and programs. Often these involve community members in one way or another. They could be community development. We would need to unpack them further. The key thing you will see in our next section will be whether the community is running them or whether the centre's running them for community. That would determine where they sit on a service delivery community development kind of spectrum. Another one that people have mentioned is what was called in often in the reports, the research that's been done previously as a polyfiller role, where neighbourhood centres play a key role in bringing in networking between agencies, in working to get the agencies working better together for local people. In a sense, that's sector development, and it's a very important service integration role. And it's an important role for neighbourhood centres because they often know best what services are working for local people and which ones aren't. But it's not in itself community development. So there's a range of things that we do that have important methods attached to them. You have the skill base, you have the knowledge base, you're developing that over time, very important things. But we would not call them community development because there's a particular method that is central to community development, and we would call them community development if they fall within that method. So you're probably wondering, okay then, so what the hell is CD? So the clearer we are on what CD is, if we give it a particular name, doesn't matter. It does reflect the literature, but doesn't matter whether it's the same as the rest of the world gives it. But it's something that we can agree on, we can work with, and we can improve our practice on over time because it's clear what we're trying to do. So, not forgetting all that work is really important, we're going to go on to a closer look at how we're defining or explaining CD. And I'm going to hand over in a minute to Maria and Carmel to take us through a story which brings out what we're thinking of as CD and what its steps and stages are and why it's so important and why neighbourhood centres are the right place for it. But I think before I hand over, Chris actually wants to, Chris or Thomas want to say something about technical details people are struggling with. Is that right?
Yes, I do, Anne, Natasha here.
Oh, sorry.
So just for this next section, there will be some images shown on the screen for part of it. So for some of us, we have different views of how we're seeing the screen. So for a full view, if it's not showing up as an entire screen for you, go to View Options. For most people, that'll be in the top right-hand corner. And there's a few options that may be available to you to select. So select either 50% or side-by-side mode or hide video panel, or you may see speaker view with gallery view. So hopefully that helps if anyone can't see the full screen. But I'll hand over to Maria.
I'm unmuted. Yay. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Natasha. Carmel and I are doing this little next section of our webinar. Carmel, can you say hello? Where are you in there? Hello, hello, Carmel.
Just remembered I have to unmute myself, everybody. Oh my goodness.
There she is. There she is.
So do I unmute myself again?
I suppose so, just for background sound, I think. Yeah. So Carmel and I are going to be having a conversation about a story from practice. Unfortunately, the technology is not supporting us to be in the screen together, so you could see us talking together. But maybe it'll happen, but we'll do our best. So I apologise if it feels a bit disjointed. I know some of you, it's lovely to see people I haven't seen for a while. I first became involved in community and neighbourhood houses in the 80s. when I was working in inner city and rural communities and then back in the inner city. And I discovered at that time how community centres could give people a base for their agendas and to participate and have a voice in the wider, a legitimate voice in the wider community. And I think Anne and Bea have both emphasised that service delivery and community development programs are both important for neighbourhood centres to achieve the goals and aspirations they set out in their documents. They're complementary elements of practice in neighbourhood centres, but there are differences. So at its heart, community development is about ordinary people learning and doing together. So ordinary people taking responsibility for their well-being. That's how I'm seeing it at the heart of it. So the key purpose, it's intentional work. It just doesn't just happen. It's intentional work, and the key purpose is to work alongside people that are experiencing disadvantage, to enable them to collectively identify their needs or their rights and to take actions to meet those, but within a democratic framework. Now, it's my pleasure to have that conversation with Carmel Daveson, as illustrated in her story. The purpose of the story is to demonstrate some of the elements, and the purpose of our conversation is to demonstrate some of the elements that distinguish this way of working. By the way, just before we start, I want to say that I have been hanging out for a long time to have this conversation with Carmel. She lives in Mackay, and I always call Carmel the godmother of community development. But she is not only the godmother, she is in fact, along with Les Halliwell, a person who brought community development to Queensland. And she's been living and breathing community development since the 60s. Carmel's going to be blushing now. She hates me saying things like this. So Carmel, would you please start your story? It took place over about 9 months, I think. And from our talks about it so far, I can say that the outcomes were significant in many ways. Thanks, Carmel. Oh, hang on, I better just say before that, sorry, I'm terrible at this, is what I always do. Natasha's created a storyboard. So that's the other element. So there'll be Carmel and then there'll be a storyboard coming up onto the screen that'll help be a bit of a visual representation. And the other thing that I forgot to mention was that we want you to actively listen for how the group Carmel's talking about were forming, learning and doing it together. Let's listen.
Thank you, Maria. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. It's very kind of you to invite me to be with you today. The story I'm going to share with you is very dear to my heart. It's about 3 amazing South Sea Island women who found the courage and the confidence to devise and implement a community-based program for the Mackay and District Australian South Sea Islander community. You're only going to hear a skeleton of this story. Someday I'd love you to hear the full story of how they went about working together and the way they structured their work within their newly fledged organisation and collaborated with 3 or other organisations, 3 structures: the state government, a traditional training organisation and a childcare centre to achieve this remarkable outcome. The story begins initially with my hearing the individual concerns from firstly Rowena, and I think we're going to put Rowena's face up on the screen, and then Winnie. The story was about the training of their people. They were sad and deeply worried that many of their people weren't finishing training, even at an entry level. At that time, I was working as a volunteer community development practitioner at a regional social development and community development organisation. We were located in a community house, very much like a neighbourhood centre, but a regional community house. People would drop in or ring us up from across a very large region, and they'd share their concerns with us. Rowena was the president of Madassia. That stands for the Mackay and District Australian South Sea Island Association. Madassia had the use of 2 rooms in the regional community house. Initially, I had the story whilst Rowena and I were having a cup of tea. Actually, I drink far too much tea, but it's always a lovely way to meet people. Embedded in both Rowena and Winnie's stories, I heard, this generation has no work ethic. They don't have role models, Carmel, as their parents can't get work. Their grandparents and great-grandparents were very proud people with working, and they used to work the cane farms, but the machines have taken away their jobs. The training system just doesn't work for our people. They start training, but then they drop out. I asked Rowena and then Winnie if they'd be interested in coming together to think about how things might be different. After chatting between themselves, Rowena rang me one day and told me that they'd like to meet with me and that they'd like to do that in Madassia's office. And they even told me what time would suit them. Rowena told me another person would be there as well as her and Winnie. The lady's name was Jean. When I met with the 3 women, they said they'd spoken with members of their organisation and that every single person was so keen for them all to proceed, for the 3 women to keep chatting with me. The members wanted, though, Rowena, Winnie and Jean to keep them informed. They were so excited to hear the story. I was also told that the women had decided they wanted to focus on childcare training. At an entry level, that was about Certificate 2. With great certainty and pride, they said things like this: our people are very good with children. They love them. They'll make great childcare workers. Over the many months, we continued to meet and we discussed many matters. It was such an exciting time, particularly for me. Together we explored how could things be different. I remember Rowena even telling me that she wanted her people to be trained on the job. She wanted them to have to arrive at the childcare centre, sign in, put their lunch in the fridge, just like everyone else did in that centre. So we explored what were the dimensions of their concerns, what were the barriers, who controlled the training agenda. Were there any structures which might support them? For example, what was the childcare environment? Who did they know? What was the present Commonwealth training environment? Were there any people who might support them? For example, the director of a childcare centre. Where could they find financial resources to develop their training program? As their confidence grew, the women found their collective voice as representatives of their organisation. They spoke with the representatives of a range of individual structures, firstly. They spoke with the state government to explore their eligibility for a grant. The training organisation to see if they could train differently. And a childcare centre to see if the centre would support their community-based training idea. After speaking individually with the representatives of the structures, a group meeting was convened. I was privileged to witness that meeting, and I will never forget it. Sitting around the table, were people from the traditional training organisation, the state government, the director of a childcare centre, and Rowena as president of Madassia. With support, Rowena found the courage to chair that meeting. Initially, she was very reluctant to do so. So she chaired the meeting, agreements were reached, and documents were signed and exchanged. The training commenced. Some of the outcomes were Madassia was successful in obtaining a grant to train 5 people. All 5 students gained their Certificate 2 in childcare. 3 of those students obtained employment before the training had even finished. All students obtained work shortly after the training period. That was the other 2. The students and the 3 women planned the special graduation ceremony. It was such a wonderful occasion. The auditorium was filled with their proud families and friends. Madassia went on to replicate this process, and a number of their other communities were trained in aged care and even knife sharpening so that they were advantaged in applying for work at the abattoir. This meant that they had obtained employment and were thus able to provide for their families. These women and I trusted this process. Initially, the process was very slow, and I spent considerable time supporting the women. However, after the success of the initial training, they and their association didn't need me anymore. They had done it themselves. Thanks, Maria. That's the story. I love it.
Just finding my way around here to unmute myself. That's the abridged version, Carmel. Thank you very much. That must have been challenging to get it into a very short amount of words. But it's a great story that highlights some key elements of the method. And one thing, so in the story, you started out listening to Winnie, and then, or Rowena, and then Winnie. And so you had these conversations, I suppose, little bit by little bit over many cups of tea, as is your wont. You got to know the women and you were hearing their concerns. So I suppose we're saying that's the private concern, their pain, their sense of powerlessness. And they were expressing this because their people were losing opportunities. They were losing education opportunities, training opportunities. They were losing opportunities for employment, which meant that they couldn't support their families. So it was really a big deal because the training wasn't culturally appropriate. So they're dropping out of it. Okay, so you're listening to all this and you responded in a particular way. So why did you decide to respond in that way? You got to unmute.
There you are. You can all see how technically illiterate I am. In developmental work, I, the worker, I'm integral to the whole process, from the beginning to the very end. But I've got a lot of power. I can make the decision to either have a service delivery response or a developmental one. Our values, our principles, our capacity to give away our power, to respect the wisdom of others, to listen deeply to their story, and to hear their private pain and the public dimensions. These are all things critical. very critical to this way of work. So some of the principles that drove me was that the private is also public. Service delivery is a private response to pain. The developmental method is together we make a difference. It's a public response. It was very clear to me that the system was not working for them. That was in their stories. So confronting structural disadvantage is another important principle. Madassia was finding its collective voice. Hence my valuing and respecting the knowledge and wisdom of these women as representatives of their structure was critically important. Another one for me is the ownership of the people of their agenda. And the process is important as those outcomes. I knew that the developmental methodology would enrich the women's leadership capacity, develop their confidence, enable them to refine old skills and learn new ones, and to develop new relationships. This is why I intentionally, instead of saying, oh, my community organisation can sort this out, or you'll do all this work if you want to go ahead, but under the banner of my centre. This is an intentional decision that you do as they want you to do. It's their agenda. I hope in some way, Maria, I answered that question.
You did very passionately, Carmel. I think I'm hearing it very clearly. So taking the private concern and looking at the public elements of that. Yeah. How were those women able to take public action and bring about these incredible changes?
Well, if I may, I would like to talk about the layers of the work.
Yes, that'd be great.
And then you will see how this happened.
Okay.
So for those of you who've read Kelly and Westerby's book, you will be aware of some of these stages. The first layer of this methodology is self, and I've tried to give you some understanding of myself when I heard those stories. And self deciding to initiate a developmental relationship. This relationship's very different to a service delivery relationship or a top-down project. It's intentional. We make this intentional. We make this decision. And Tony and Anthony, sorry, that's his formal name, Anthony calls this the implicate layer. The next layer, of course, is the IU layer, the micro layer. And by that I mean I and Rowena shared a cup of tea, and she shared that story. I and you, which is Winnie. This is where I and you, I and Winnie, I and Rowena, explore if we're ready to take the next steps. If he or she is ready to meet with others, we commence that journey which will bring about the community change. It is the I-you layer. When I and you walk that bridge together and enter into the next layer, and the next layer is what is called the meso layer. This layer is the public one, the we. By that I mean 3 or more people, only ever small, always small in the beginning. So this is the small public process where ownership of the process is critical. It's the layer where the group frames the dimensions of the concern, the group develops its action plans, and agreements are reached. this work is not doing for others. We will have our own little action plan and project plan and whatever way you want to call it in your own work. But this action plan comes from these early conversations. Relationships are mutual, and this is where together we co-create the work.
Thanks, Carmel. So the agreement, sorry?
I hope you're able to see those or hear those layers in that précis of a story.
Well, I can. I'm really impressed with what's coming on, sort of impressing on me, is that the formation of those early relationships is foundational, and the agreement. So you didn't just rush out and go put out a notice to say everyone that's concerned about this, come here. You tried to stay with those early conversations so that the women then could move forward in their own, at a pace that's their pace and on agreements that they made.
Yes, Maria.
Yeah, okay.
That's
so let's talk about,
work.
let's talk about this pace issue, this pace of the work. So I understand that this project occurred over about 9 months, which for those sort of outcomes seems pretty amazing. But there can be tensions for workers in neighbourhood centres using this work, and the apparent slowness or pace of the work and a lack of broad understanding of what the work is. And it can be a bit invisible, some of this work. It seemed to me that you were very clear that the women should be in control of their story and any actions taken. Can you tell us a little bit more about the importance of ensuring people have ownership?
Absolutely. The pace was very slow initially,
Right.
very, very slow indeed. But when we work with people, we can see how, although it's slow, it moves quickly towards the end. And I'd just like to comment on the tensions, Maria, if I may.
Okay.
There's always tension for workers. We've got tension right through the whole process. And this is why it's absolutely critical that we constantly reflect on what's happening. I really think it's marvellous if you can find a mentor, because you can, chat about that.
Yeah.
The worker, we've got to always acknowledge that we are very, very powerful people. And because of that, it's essential that we are conscious of that right through the whole process, because it's our need to take over, it's our need to rush it. So unless we acknowledge that, and it's been constant all my life that I have to remember that, then we will drop the process, we'll muck it up, instead of slowly being with and working with others. We should always remember it's the people's agenda, it is not our agenda. It's not our organisation's agenda if we're being given the charter to be a community development worker. So this is very critical, and we must transfer the power we have to others. Let me give you an example. I always ensure from the very beginning that the people who have the concern are involved, as Maria said, in the decision making. Simple things, minuscule things in the beginning. For example, making the phone call, supporting the person to think about how will they make that phone call, who are they talking to, what is it they want to actually say, being present with them while they do that. It's imperative from the beginning that we have these agreements, that the people frame their concerns and develop their action plans. So all these little steps, as I explained earlier in my story, or in their story, initially, they didn't even want to make the phone call. They wanted me to make the phone call. But by the end of the story, Rowena's chairing meetings. She hands out pieces of paper and asks these people to sign them. She was not going to let them renege. That's an amazing, amazing growth. And so the early attention to process is where the group learns and develops the confidence. They find their own voice. Of course, you all know I love the saying, we did it ourselves. I hope that makes sense. Haven't a clue if it does. But it
does. I think we've got a fair idea of how the work was framing up and how the women were learning and doing together. Yeah. So, Carmel, I just noticed there we talked in earlier on about the outcomes that came from the work, but in this further discussion, we've discovered a whole lot more. So, in addition to negotiating more culturally appropriate training and getting all these outcomes and jobs and stuff from that, there's these other outcomes we call in community development, or whatever, probably in all works, but human services work, process outcomes that emerged that seem to come out of engaging and trusting that process. So it seemed that the women sort of renewed their friendship to be more like relationships for change. And that those friends developed a collective sense of power to act in their collective interests, and developed a lot of trust in each other and the process that you guys were doing together. And the amazing thing, as you've just said, about the skills and experience, like in order to engage in this work and to engage in the public realm and to start having meetings with government and all that sort of stuff, you've got to develop that skill and capacity to speak with people in authority. I mean, I know that even today it's making me nervous because I've got to, speak to people. But, you're not holding anything over me, but to go and speak on behalf of your people and your organisation, that's a big deal. So that's, and the experience gained from that. But then also those other experiences about the everyday work, you've got to learn how to make decisions together, which is not easy, and get to agreements, organise meetings, write up minutes and keep records of things and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of other sort of process outcomes, I would see.
Yes, and I think this is what many of us struggle with, to articulate the process outcomes as well as the final outcomes, because often it's the final outcomes that we're sort of more skilled at reporting against. One of the most important process outcomes, I mean, they are all important, but for me is the development of leadership in this process of the journey together. I must confess that I constantly hear the service delivery response to leadership. On the website, there are numerous offering of courses for leadership. I myself even hear it today in a developmental organisation where they say, we'll run courses for the people to develop their leadership skills. What the process outcome is, as Maria was saying, and I think I bored you crazy by saying that the leadership begins to develop from the beginning. From the beginning. And we make a mistake by thinking, not you, I'm claiming this is my thing. Often we make a mistake of assuming that people have no skills, no knowledge, but in fact they have many, many skills, and their knowledge of their own concern is far greater than ours would ever be. And so when they start to speak up for their community, when they become a resource in their community, when they develop relationships with other people in authority, these are all the process outcomes.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is the power balance becomes more mutual and they feel respected. The attitude of, oh, the professionals know it all. Oh, no, that worker actually has got a diploma and a degree and therefore they should know more about this than I do. That power imbalance it becomes more mutual. And so finally, I'd like to say that they no longer see themselves as clients. I hate that word, I absolutely hate it, as clients, but as citizens who work together, undertake actions that they believe is important, with always, of course, I must say, they've got the right to make mistakes as we would see it. So they, as citizens, they work together, they undertake action, and they bring about the community change. That's me. Thanks for listening.
I think that's it. They did it themselves. They did it themselves, Carmel.
Yeah, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. And unless you really have experienced something, if I may have one last word, unless you've really experienced something like this, it's really hard to actually understand even how it could happen. But you'll never forget it once it happens to you.
That I can attest to. That is very true.
I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you, Carmel. That was really good. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your enormous amount of wisdom. That's tremendous, and in such a clear way. And through this little process, we've tried to distinguish some of the features of the community development method. And the features we've been emphasising include some of these layers that you're seeing on the screen now, but that the people experiencing the concerns or the issues are at the centre of the work, one. That the skills, knowledge and wisdom of the people are valued, that those skills and knowledge is built upon and used every step of the way. And that the people who have the concern or the vision of how things could be different are in control of what actions are taken. And that's what that old community development axiom or whatever it is about. For the people, by the people. Is that the people are in control of the actions. So as Carmel said, at the end of the day, people can say, we did it ourselves. Thank you for coming on this story journey with us. And I'm going to hand back now to Anne, I think. Who am I handing to?
It's to be.
Oh, to be?
And back
I'm
to
sorry,
be.
darling. She's our other person on the journey. Oh, no, we're all on the journey together, but nothing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Oh, well, thank you, Carmel, and for sharing that lovely story. And Maria and Carmel together for unpacking the layers and helping us to actually see and understand the depth of the changes that took place and why and how that happened. So we're going to now go into back into our groups, and I guess the way to frame this group is to say you've now heard a much more precise way of naming what community development is. Okay, that's what's been demonstrated. This is what community development is. Now we want to ask you in your groups to think about this. Do you think this has been lost in our practice in neighbourhood centres? And do you think it is relevant for today? So it's a two-part question. So again, we have the 15 minutes, 13 minutes for discussion, and we need you to summarise and come back to the main room and upload that. Okay, so over to Chris and Natasha to take us into our groups.
Hi, Mark.
Hello. Hi, Maria.
Hello.
Good to see you, Maria. You're looking great.
Thank you. You too. You look really fit.
I've got a fit-looking head, have I?
I don't know, you just look muscly or something.
Oh,
Everyone should be back now, Anne, if you want to recommence.
Okay. Is it me?
Well, we was going to have the host group just make comments, I guess, from some
Yes.
of these. Yeah, so if you want to start us, Anne, that would be lovely.
When I've read it through quite a few of the comments that people had put up on the chat, and you know, I think we're very much all on the same page. There's a lot of similarity in what people are thinking and struggling with. And can you see me?
Yes.
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 Sorry, I'll just get rid of that. We talked about the pendulum swinging. It's been very far over to the service delivery end, to the individualism end, to the consumerism end, to the non-democratic end of the continuum, it's socially as well as in the sector. And the tide does seem to be turning, but the infrastructure to support community development is still quite weak. It's hard to get training, it's hard to get board members who understand, it's hard to have managers who understand. It's there's a whole lot of building and rebuilding to do to really support and sustain this practice. But in our group, we were very optimistic. We all thought something precious has been lost, and we all thought it's important to work towards. What's happening there?
Okay. Any other?
Can I just add one thing to that? There's quite a bit of stuff in the community development literature that the internal resources for community development are our own practice frameworks and our confidence with them. And the external resources are a whole range of things: suitable policy, suitable training institutions, suitable you know, or boards and organisations, and a notion of people-owned structures. So the external, it's that shift about the external structures not being strong. That's me.
Okay. Well, Maria and I ended up in the same group. So yeah, yes. But our discussion was, I guess, in our little group was that that yes, it has been lost. That was certainly stated, and perhaps not really understanding the organisations struggle with at both the board level and management level, and of course funding requirements in terms of outcomes. They're not process outcomes, and they're not those sorts of things are not understood, even as, I guess, as workers, to be able to define them clearly, to be able to say this is what comes out of the work that we do. That's not understood, and that's something that we need to do some work on. And that it is not just the demands of everyday work to do this and do that, produce this, show how you've achieved it, what are the targets, all that kind of pressure makes it very hard to even have cups of tea and get 2 or 3 people together. I mean, that was one comment because of those demands. And that, but I guess I heard that there was a desire. Yes, we need to learn more about it, and we need to get together with others and support each other to be able to move forward in this way. So that was kind of some of the things, very similar, a bit different, but very similar to some of the things that you heard, Anne.
Anyone else just want to comment?
Are we going to get this all back in a document?
Yes. we really need people to write other points that they've made up on the Zoom, on the chat.
Yeah, I'm just writing some from our group now. But,
Yeah.
Well, I had a wonderful time with two, or three, but two amazing women. It was Claudia and Jodie. And I wondered if either of you felt inclined to say anything. Put you on the spot, didn't I?
Yes.
Claudia, I didn't mention this when I was talking to Carmel, but I actually feel my creativity is stifled by the requirements to meet the state government's, agreement that we have. And I said to Carmel, I'm not even allowed to be called a community development worker. I have to be a community sector support coordinator. And it's frustrating for me.
Good area for some community development work. Change the way departments relate with us.
I wonder, Anne, in raising some of the matters in their small groups, if they were hearing common matters within the sharing of their stories, because I think sometimes we think that the developmental work is always outside us, but often within our structures and the state as a whole, like these requirements to report in certain ways, that's embedded in a lot of people's stories.
Yes.
And what is that meaning then? How do we with our boards raise these issues? And how then do the boards, who are the members of QFCA, of course, with our workers, start to articulate it and decide that something needs to be really done about it?
Absolutely.
So the methodology is relevant within ourselves, in our own practice, when we raise common issues within our structures. Anyway, it was just a thought. I'll keep quiet. I'm muting myself.
Yeah, I think you're right, Carmel. Okay. Well, I hope that you can all just record the issues, because we will actually pick them up in future. And of course, this webinar is an opportunity for us to, what we're doing is having the conversation and sharing our issues. And Carmel's quite right. If we're not happy with the way things are, collectively we can make a difference. And we can do it ourselves, I'm told. So let's get those issues up, and we will document them in this research report, which is for us. Meanwhile, we have a poll question for you, and Chris is going to put up the poll question. If you could look at this, tick your answers. You can, I think you can do multiple answers, and we'd love to hear what each one of you is thinking about this. Has everyone got the poll? Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. We have about around 63% saying yes, they are, around about 60% saying they should be but are often not, and around about 4% saying I don't know.
Can you say the numbers again, Chris?
I would say it's fluctuating a little bit. 64% yes, they are. 49% they should be but are often not, and 5% I don't know.
Very good. All right. We have a sense there then that there's a lot of agreement that they should be or they are, which is a fabulous, oh, there we go. Chris is sharing the poll results now. No one said this is not a neighbourhood centre role. I'm so delighted to say that. You are allowed to say whatever you like. Okay, this has brought us to a point of understanding and a point of agreement, I think, and is bringing us very quickly towards the end of our session. And just before Natasha takes us through the final bit of the session, I'd just like to very quickly share with you a bit of an overview of the research so you can think about that. I will actually get this PowerPoint to you and also the Griffith University information sheet and informed consent forms. I'll just see if I can share that. Can you all see this? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see it? Just, yeah, okay. All right, so I'm just going to move this out of the way. What we're really trying to do is turn the whole thinking of research around here. Usually it's the researchers who are the experts, they frame the questions, they ask you. We're actually wanting you to be the experts. So we're saying neighbourhood centres in conversation about their communities, their work, their practice. This is research. It is research which supports neighbourhood centres to develop and drive their own collective agendas. And it supports neighbourhood centres to be leaders in their field. So I'm just going to get rid of that a minute. So this is your research. Collectively, you have the steering wheel. You listen, talk, explore, argue, examine, agree, disagree. We, the researchers, write it down. We're going to do a bit of analysis of it and feed it back to you. But you must push us towards the very diverse truths that you want to tell in the research report as a kind of documentation of this process and of your current thinking. It's a collective endeavour, but it's your research, your voice, your leadership. And finally, it's public work. What we're embarked on now together is a piece of public work. We're sharing experiences. We're expressing to each other and hearing from each other the stories that are important. This will happen over the next 4 sessions. Research conventions require consideration of confidentiality and anonymity. But we can do this best by committing to make everything public. If we commit together to that, then there are no issues of confidentiality. That way, we can best contribute to the wisdom that we're trying to build together. With your permission, we'd like the recordings of the sessions to be on the QFCA website. However, the final report, because of the nature of final reports, will have nothing about who said what or which centres are doing what. It will report what we have all collectively said without naming people. So this is public work. It's through your participation, you contribute to the collective wisdom of the neighbourhood centre sector. It's a somewhat different way of doing research, and we hope that this is a way of doing research that is interesting to you and that you will want to participate in. Because we want to do it through Griffith Uni, we do need to get your informed consent to do it this way, and we've sent forms out. We will send forms out to you. But are there any questions about that?
Hi, it's Gillian.
Hi, Gillian.
Hi, just a question. So who's the key audience for this research report? Will it be community centres themselves, or is it going to be used for advocacy in some way?
That's for you to decide. At the moment, we're seeing this as research by neighbourhood centres for neighbourhood centres, and that QFCA will be, you know, holding much of that data for neighbourhood centres. if you want to use the report as evidence for some other purpose, then neighbourhood centres, you know, that QFCA will put that out and people will think about whether that's appropriate. But I think building the collective voice of the neighbourhood centres is really what the research is about. So they're the primary audience. Does that make sense, Gillian?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
So if we want to continue our conversations with some of the people we've met, or if we want to say, can we apply this methodology to any issue that might have come up today with each other, how would we do that? Do we just ring, I don't know, we look them up on the internet, or do we do it through QFCA?
I'm happy to link people together if they want to be linked together. So just flick me an email and I'll pass on details, exchange details.
That goes both ways, Chris. You know, people might want to say, I'd like to talk something through further with someone. We're happy for that to happen if you just link us.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, if we're happy to just accept that for now, we'll talk more about the research and subsequent sessions. I'll hand over to Natasha.
Thanks, Anne. So as we know, this is just the start of a conversation together. So the next webinar will be held on Wednesday, the 12th of August, between 1:30 and 3 p.m. All of the following webinars will be 1:30 to 3 p.m, so half an hour shorter, on this same Zoom link. So that will be resent to you, but overall, just to know that it's a consistent conversation with that same Zoom link. And the next one will move our focus closer and closer into what centres are doing and can do by exploring experiences of a neighbourhood, of a community centre. So notes from today will be sent before the next webinar, along with a link of the recording of today and the Zoom link again for the next session. And just to be aware, we're trying to build these conversations and our understanding of the methodology over time throughout these webinars. So for people who weren't able to be on today, we'll be encouraging them to look at this, watch the recording of today before the next one, just so we can keep the flow of the conversation and everyone on the same page. So overall, it's a consistent, we'll hopefully have a fairly consistent bulk of group throughout the time, and we won't be further promoting it outside this. It's really for those that came on. If you are already linked up with someone who is really wanting to come through, you're welcome to share that that link. We just do ask for people to see the prior recording before joining. And that's really wrapping it up for today. So we really, oh yes, Anne. Oh, and the evaluation to come on now. So if you could please have a look at that and fill that in, would be wonderful for your feedback there. So we'll wait for you to have a moment to put that on, put those answers in. And while that's happening, just really like to thank you all very much for participating today. I've definitely enjoyed the conversations, and we hope you all have too through the whole group and the breakout groups. And then it will be all joining together for those that would like to continue this conversation in 3 weeks' time for the second webinar.
And Natasha,
yeah.
If people felt that they really wanted to explore some particular aspect, is there a process for that to happen? Like some people might be saying, well, we're funded to develop or to do certain things. How do we make that more developmental? Or if there were questions like that, I just wonder, do they let Chris have some idea? Naturally, the webinars can't focus on everything, but some workers may have a particular interest in a particular part of something. It's just a question. I should have asked it earlier. I apologise.
Well, it's a dialogue, isn't it? So I think people put in, we try to take things on board, people seek clarification. People need to let us know.
Great.
And Chris, we thought about setting up a forum on QFCA. Is that a possibility?
There actually is a forum already on our website.
Okay.
QFCA.org.au.
Yeah.
There's a forum page, and you can sign up as a member of the website and discuss further there.
That's a great idea. Yeah. But also do feel free to contact us, Chris or myself or any one of us individually, if you want to make sure that something gets covered. Take it up, empower yourselves. We welcome it.
Chris, would you send out a note to everyone about if there's any follow-up chats that people want to have between webinars or following up from something today, to put it in the forum?
You're on mute, Chris.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you, Chris. That's great.
Well, thanks everyone. And before you go, the chat is still open. So if you want to say anything before you leave, that's fine.